If you're trying to build a rich life, your partner isn't just your plus one, they're your co-CEO. I'm being 100% serious because the quiet truth is that a lot of women, a lot of high achieving women, are out there building wealth, thinking that they're super cold-hearted, super unemotional for treating their relationships like business mergers. Because apparently, if you treat love like a transaction, it leads to disconnection, emotional unavailability, indecision, perpetual dissatisfaction. And actually, in order to bring back heart and humanity, we need to let love breathe and stop treating it like a business deal that we need to close. But here is my take, the financial hot girl take. Love isn't a spreadsheet, yes, but life does require a little bit of strategy, especially for women. Choosing a partner affects your wealth, your health, your career trajectory, your caregiving load, and actually let's use the stats here to put some facts behind this. Women over 50 are the fastest growing group experiencing homelessness in the UK and Australia. And in the UK, the gender pension gap is nearly 35%, and most of that is due to caregiving and part-time work. And widows are the most likely group to experience financial hardship and homelessness, not because of poor decisions, but because of completely outdated norms and just a general lack of proactive planning. So how do we stop playing defense when it comes to love as ambitious, high-achieving women and start building financial intimacy? Let's get into it. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Financial Hot Girl Show. Today we are talking about love and money and the fact that we are being pushed to decide between treating relationships like a strategic decision versus being really romantically optimistic, because I feel like the world and society makes us as women have to feel like we choose between the two rather than just having a bit of both. And I especially feel that as someone who is type A, quite ambitious, quite career business orientated, but has been in a long-term relationship. And we are honestly really told that love is not a business deal. Like, it is shoved down our throats in the media, in movies, in music. And it shouldn't be. They are correct. It shouldn't be a business deal. But that does not mean that love has nothing to do with money, because it absolutely has everything to do with money. Money is the reason that 65% of people get divorced. Financial disagreements is the number one reason that most people actually break up or get divorced in the first place. So when women choose the wrong partner, we're not just risking heartbreak, we're risking a lifetime of being financially behind. So this isn't just about one bad relationship, it's how we're socialized to think about love and money. So the idea for this episode came to me after I consumed two specific pieces of content, not together, but it was Lindsay McMillan's TED Talk on love and money, and it was also the Hot, Smart, Rich episode by Maggie Sellers on love and money and love being a business deal. Now, in Lindsay's TED Talk, she basically argues that we've accidentally applied too much of our Wall Street language and concepts to love and relationships. And she comes from a Wall Street background, so this was her observation of her life and society as a whole. Like, we're using terms like emotional ROI and cutting losses when it comes to breaking down relationships and evaluating them and whether they're right for us. And she outlines that love has become super transactional, and it's mostly due to, dating apps, ghosting, our fear of vulnerability as a whole as society. But her key idea was that love is not a transaction, it's a transformation, which I do wholeheartedly believe. And I do think that I do sometimes believe that love has to be a business transaction sometimes, but she really, in her TED Talk, urged us as the listeners to throw away that mindset and make room for real connection to enter the chat again, because we have lost touch with that a little bit because of the fact that we've kind of commoditized everything. But here's the thing. I think romantic optimism can be really powerful, but I also think it is super dangerous for us as women without financial literacy. Like, romantic optimism without financial literacy is the most dangerous thing ever, because that's how we get stuck. Which now brings me into the Hot, Smart, Rich episode. So in that episode, Maggie touched on so many really good points, some really good hard truths. And she took the completely different angle of the fact that love and relationships are a business deal. They are a transaction. It's silly not to admit and acknowledge that they are in this modern day for modern women, for modern ambitious women. And she unpacked the real costs and she unpacked the real costs that women face in relationships in this day and age. And those are things like unpaid labor, career setbacks, caregiving responsibilities, and the costs of those, and the burden that women take on in their relationships. And some hard truths that she really resurfaced were the fact that we have been socialized as a society to see that giving and not growing is the virtuous thing to do in a relationship. And even post-exit, even the way I'm saying it, post-exit, women actually still see or shy away from investing, whereas men will just casually throw like multiple G's into their friend's random business idea. We have a bit more hesitancy, right? That's very validated hesitancy, but the hesitancy exists. Widows are more likely to end up in poverty, as Maggie highlighted, and also, as I stated at the beginning of the episode, there are stats around this that women over 50 are the fastest group experiencing homelessness in the UK and Australia. And finally, Maggie highlighted, which I think is so common in the media and also even in movies and music, that women are often the ones who end up funding their male partner's success through this sacrificial virtue of giving in terms of sacrificing their own dreams and ambitions for their partner's success without getting that return. Like there's that famous, I don't even know if it's a concept or it's that thing of like all these singers having their first girlfriends be the ones to make them who they were, and then they found their real partners after that. So, and Maggie also highlighted that financial transparency, even in business sometimes, is still relatively taboo, like in relationships. It's still something that people are getting stuck on in those early stages that comes up in getting icks or red flags when you bring it up too early. And she really recognized how hard money conversations can be in relationships. But what we didn't cover in that episode is how those money conversations actually have to happen, especially when your partner might be the biggest financial risk or the biggest financial asset in your relationship. Because again, we can't ignore the fact that love and money do overlap, even though we risk treating love like a business and like a transaction too much sometimes. So where does that actually leave us? Because that leaves us torn between romantic freedom, being emotional, being a lover girl, and financial self-protection. So we need to make this practical. What are the actual conversations that we should be having if we want love and money to work together and not against each other? Because I firmly believe there is a world where both of those exist. And the financial hot girl framework is how I see it. Choosing a partner, it's absolutely a financial decision, right? But it doesn't mean it can't be like full of love, full of human connection, full of joy, full of the butterflies that you get on a Friday night date night. And it's all about having conversations with yourself and your partner really early in the relationship. This does not have to be date 1, date 2, but it has to be before you kind of formally commit yourself to someone, right? And 5 traits that I think signal that someone is financially aligned with you that aren't necessarily financial to begin with are ambition is the first one. Like that is one that I take super seriously in my close-knit circles. And I don't mean ambition in terms of chasing status. I mean ambition in terms of being really growth orientated and not coming from a place of scarcity or lack. And even when I say this, I don't want anyone listening to think you need to, again, like how Lindsay McMillan phrases things, cut your losses if someone is not got a growth mindset or isn't ambitious. They just have to be willing to see that ambition for themselves or see themselves as someone who is bigger than their current problems or the things in their life that they can't control. Because everyone has elements of lack mindset that keep coming up. I certainly have not gotten over a lot of my lack mindset, dregs. Like there are still things from my time as a scarcity mindseted person, I've just made that up, that still show up in my life and I'm still working on them, but I really am aware and embrace the growth mindset, and that's something I do want in a partner and I do appreciate in a partner, and I think that is something that will also open the door for the rest of the traits that I think signal that someone is financially aligned. The second one is emotional maturity, and this one is not directly directly related to finances, but it does help with the openness of financial literacy in a relationship, right? Because if someone is emotionally mature, they're able to take accountability not only for their actions, but for financial aspects in their life as well, right? If you're emotionally mature, you will understand that you cannot get to your goals without having to change something in terms of your life. Like, you know that you maybe need to fix your spending habits in order to buy this house together. You know that if your partner has certain financial values, that maybe you're not maybe, but you're going to respect those and build on trust in the relationship. Emotional maturity bleeds into loads of different things and ways you'll behave in a relationship that I think are really like financially adjacent. Now, the third one is financial literacy, but not like financial literate, but I don't mean in the sense of someone being financially literate full stop, because none of us were born financially literate. What I think this is really important for is to signal that someone is open to learn about financial literacy or supports your growth with financial literacy as well. Because I think a willingness to learn in this area is just the most important part, because a lack of willingness to learn is a huge red flag. What do you mean you don't want to be financially literate? What do you mean you don't want to understand money? That is literally the way everything works. It's the way that the relationship is going to thrive, is if you both understand money, how it works, and how it's going to influence your goals and life together. Now, number 4 is really important for women, and that is a respect for your independence. And someone who has respect for your independence is someone who is not threatened by your wins. And when someone is not threatened by your wins, that means they're going to help you grow. They're going to help you become independent. They're going to help you get those wins, because you're not having to fight someone who doesn't want you to get those by default. So I think this is a huge trait that is really important to look out for in someone. And I feel like you can pick this up by winning and then just observing how they are, and also observing how comfortable you are winning in your own life. Like, do you feel enabled to go after what it is you want, celebrate yourself, and like not have to ask for respect, validation, and recognition? Because if you feel safe doing those things, by default, that person has respect for your independence. And then the final thing is aligned future goals. And this is something that will come up hopefully through like shared conversations on your values and things, but it includes things like how you want to live, work, how you want to parent in the future, if that's a way to open the child conversation as well, how you want to travel, how you want to grow and get better at things. Like, how do you want to upskill? Like, and when I say upskill, I mean like for example, my partner is super fit and is really into sports and is very disciplined. And that was a skill I really wanted to develop in my life. And we had open conversations about how I could actually do that, like how I could go from 0 to the next step. So those are 5 traits that I think are really important to look out for when you are looking for a partner and when you're evaluating the ROI on a partnership, because that as a sentence and a framework is something I think about a lot, because as I have grown up and kind of developed in my own relationship, my reframe has really changed from individual to collective growth. So like, how can 2 people amplify not only each other's potential, but each other's financial potential? This is really like beyond like spreadsheets, budgeting, writing down your financial goals. It's like emotionally, intellectually, and financially, how are you enabling each other to grow and get those deeper pockets? Because that aligns with having those deeper emotions as well. Because growing financially is such a hard thing to do. Like, if you really think about it, whether you're trying to grow a business or you're actually just trying to level up in your 9 to 5, that is a difficult process in terms of working hard, making sacrifices in your home life, having to maybe sacrifice a little bit of that emotional aspect for your relationship, but all for shared goals, hopefully, that you've already spoken about, right? So how are you emotionally and intellectually doing those things for each other to make that growth a safe thing to do for each of you? Because really, if you think about it, if you're growing wealth together and you are amplifying each other's potential, 2 people growing wealth together can accumulate 30 to 45% more than 2 individuals trying to grow separately. And part of growing together is recognizing that there are financial and non-financial contributions that enable wealth building in a household. And I'm talking about just like in a relationship, in a conscious partnership. And recognizing these is super important, I think, for the modern day relationship. Like, you need to quantify the unquantifiable things that are happening in your partnership, in your relationship, that allow both of you to grow. So think about it practically. Like, if you had to hire people to perform things that are going on in the house, like whether that's cleaning, cooking, keeping up the household, whatever it is, what would those cost? So you could quantify it in that way. You could also quantify it through an opportunity cost approach. Like, think about what income is being sacrificed when you're performing those roles. You can think about what percentage of the primary earner in your household would be impossible without the support going on in the background. And something that I really like to think about when I'm, thinking about like quantifying the unquantifiable or like unpaid labor and all of the things that help someone build a collective success or collective growth is the concept of even relationship capital. If you're building something together, you're building something that's greater than the sum of its parts. Because relationship capital is almost like when you stop asking, what will I get out of this? And start asking, well, what can we build together? It's using both of your resources to support a shared goal. In the same vein, you can think about it as someone who emotionally and financially supports someone with a bigger goal. Even something as small as like, okay, I'm going to emotionally and financially support you trying to build this business. The person builds their business and is able to actually skyrocket the household income in 5 years. So instead of trying to individually do those things separately, so that person just goes away, tries to build their business without the emotional and financial support, and one partner just does their own thing while the other partner is struggling, they probably wouldn't be able to build that business without the support, right? So it's all about combining resources, but combining resources with the transparency of like shared goals and shared values, and knowing that you're both in this together, building something together long term for each other. And then let's talk about how the wealth gap starts to appear in relationships, which I think can happen quite insidiously and can even multiply itself if you don't really talk about it. And I think the biggest thing that causes wealth gaps are income disparities, which then feed power imbalances, which then feed shame and not speaking up, and kind of a lack of financial and emotional transparency as well in relationships. Because the psychology of earning differences, I think, causes people to behave in weird ways in relationships. And for example, the wealth gap actually, if we take this stat, women are still performing 65% more unpaid labor, even when they're the primary breadwinners, which means that the invisible work that they're doing will impact their earning potential, which will impact the partnership's earning potential as a whole, right? And that's why it's so important to have those discussions, or try to look for those 5 traits of someone who will be supportive financially in a relationship early on. Because for equalizing that financial power in a relationship, it requires strategy, especially when like incomes are super drastically different. You need to have so much of your like goals and feelings around money as a couple and individually laid out on the table to start, so that you can actually implement that strategy in the first place. And you also have to talk about the reality of caregiving responsibilities, and that comes up when you start talking about like aligning your future goals and what those future goals are together. Because the thing you have to do in a relationship is make each other feel safe, right? So when you're having conversations around your goals, your responsibilities, income disparities, you need to create like a financial arrangement that is fair within the realms of your partnership, that recognizes all forms of contribution in a relationship, whether they're quantifiable or not. Because the primary thing, like the only thing you have to do in a relationship is try and maintain that sense of dignity financially and a voice, especially when you're not the primary earner. Because I feel like when you're not the primary earner, you feel like automatically you don't have a voice because you don't have that power. When really it requires a bit of upfront thinking and strategy in place early on in a relationship to have those conversations, to allow yourself to utilize a voice anytime those income disparities show up and that power starts to be imbalanced. If power imbalances and income disparities are like present at the beginning of a relationship as well, that needs to be talked about early. Like your feelings and your fears and potential like shame triggers, those things need to come up early before you're in too deep and you feel like it's normal to not actually speak up or try and figure out a situation and a fair financial arrangement for you to survive and thrive in that relationship. And honestly, if we get to the hard truth of it, the honest conversations and these harder conversations are often the most important ones, because these are the ones that we will put off because we either know that the answer is not what we want to hear, or we know that what the solution that we want is never going to happen. We avoid the inevitable, which is just those feeding into those stats of breaking up and divorcing because of financial disagreements or money. So avoiding money talks do not protect the relationship. They do not protect your happiness or sense of peace. That peace will always be troubled until you have that talk, or until the relationship does not exist and that peace is actually allowed to thrive. So you really do have to think about finding the courage to advocate for yourself and also the relationship financially, even when it feels uncomfortable, and also even when it feels unromantic, because that's the whole point of this episode, is that having these conversations feels so unromantic and cold that people will either put off doing it because I'm here for a relationship, not for a business transaction, false, or you feel like it will put your partner off of you more. And again, it just comes back to values. If your partner feels like financial or practical conversations are off-putting, that is a red flag in terms of, okay, well, that means you're not open to talking about financial literacy or growing in terms of financial literacy, which means we are not on the same page, right? And that can be a hard truth for someone to accept, because you like all the other parts of this person. So it's important to think about what you want in a relationship and what you need to feel safe, and also ensuring that, partnerships, financial partnerships, romantic partnerships incorporate all the contributions to shared success, whether those contributions are financial, non-financial, quantifiable, and non-quantifiable. We need arrangements and conversations to happen that recognize all of them, so that all of them can be brought up at any time, and you have a voice over every element that feeds into the relationship. And the problem I think that can appear sometimes is, okay, well, what if you're already in a relationship and you actually don't know where they stand? And this is where guidance and scripts for how to bring things up can be really, really useful. So I have made a Notion template with scripts for the most important conversations that I also think are also the most often avoided conversations that I think need to happen in romantic relationships. And there are 5 to 7 scripts available in a little Notion template that I will plug into the YouTube description or the show notes for this episode. And if you still feel awkward about bringing these things up and using the scripts, I have made a little cheat sheet for you to try and bring these up in even more sneaky ways. I really truly think that love is not a business deal, but it's also not a charity case. You're allowed to want someone who inspires you emotionally, intellectually, and financially, and you're allowed to build a future that works for you both. And just remember that financial compatibility itself, it does not mean you both enter the relationship perfect with money. It just means that you're committed to learning, adapting, and building together. So remember the financial hot girl mindsets for this episode. You're allowed to want deep love and deep pockets. And being intentional about who your partner is for life does not make you cynical or cold. It makes you super smart, because your future does not depend on choosing someone who's perfect. Your future depends on choosing someone who's going to grow with you. So let's not make the mistake of confusing romance with recklessness, and embrace the magic of finding love that's based on clarity and not emotions, because choosing the right partner is the most romantic money move you can make. So if you love this episode and it got you thinking a little bit differently about money and relationships, I would love it if you could send it to your group chat, your situationship, your partner, because while the Financial Hot Girl Show is all about getting you mentally, physically, and financially rich, it includes also not being afraid to talk about the topics that are hard to talk about with the people who matter in your life. So don't forget to subscribe, and hit the notifications bell for this episode. Thank you for listening and watching. And don't forget to check out the Love and Money Conversation Starter Pack in the description and the show notes below. I will see you next time.